I knew there was something about me today. I knew there was
everything in those days, you know that after World War II, everything good was white. And so my mom always remembers me saying, you know, we'd be watching all these war movies, and I'd always say, get the Japs, get the Japs. And she would say, well, you know what? This shows you how little I recognized of my own self. She said, well, you're Japanese too. I says, no, I'm not. That group of Caucasians would be calling Lipsey Chink all the time. They liked him, but they used the term Chink as his name.
in a different way. I knew.
I mentioned before, I grew up in a farming community in Aldergo, just about an hour's drive outside of Vancouver. And growing up, there were very few other Japanese Canadians, no other Asians, almost no other Asians. Indo-Canadians, there were a few, but very few, but not very many. And then it was mostly Mennonite community. So I always felt like I didn't quite fit in, and I couldn't quite put my finger on why I was so different. And I mentioned before that I used to hide in classes because I was so self-conscious.
Wow.
I felt like I didn't fit in, growing up in this vacuum and kind of relating to what was happening, but never had the skills or the understanding to be able to figure out the family life and within the context of the community. But then, of course, with the hippie movement, then I totally glommed onto that idea, and I thought, wow, I believe in love and peace, being free. Yeah. And then, yet somehow I knew that I didn't quite fit into that picture either. So it was like something that I aspired to. Like, I love this idealism, right?
Right.
And I grew up on this idealism, but it didn't work for me.
I looked in the mirror.
When I graduated, I had a government job. Researching minority youth groups. Somehow through that process, I met Ron.
You met Ron.
So I called him up and I went to his place and sat there for 3 hours.
Right.
He totally gave it to me in terms of who I was, Asian Canadian, Asian American history, internment. I was so blown away. It was a life transforming thing for me.
I met Ron, and then I'm walking, I think it was in the Buchanan building. I think that's where English was, right? And I see this Asian guy, and he had this long black trench coat. And then as we were talking, it was like what you said. He said, you know what? You want to know what a gook looks like? He looks like you. And he points his finger at me. When we went to Davis, that was when I really became aware of, how a current, relevant, significant Asian community and how, is and how it is successful. My first sense of that there is support for us and there is a Japanese Canadian community that could be started somehow, and that we were a part of it at the beginning. That first step with that little photo exhibit, we didn't know where it was going to lead, but you have to take one step at a time.
This whole movement turned into getting involved into Narigumi,
right,
which led then to Powell Street Festival and Katari Taiko, and then also the whole redress movement. So it was such an exciting time. Yeah. It was like everything, all the parts of my life
were coming together the way they should.
Any other way? Then I looked around and I saw you. And it was the first time I knew who we really are. And we walked, feeling the ground we'd someday own, not alone.
To me, everyone went off on their own in their professions, kind of continuing with this way of thinking about ourselves and our identity and communities. I thought that as time went on, like for the next generation, they're not going to have these problems with their identity. There's still younger Japanese Canadians, and I think Chinese Canadians too, who still feel the same as we do, as we did.
Yeah, so growing up, I was also I was a huge hockey fan, and my family's country of origin is Japan. But I was called by a coach once the Great Wall of China, and he called me that kind of throughout the season. And it was hard. I didn't really say anything because I knew that I was a goalie, so it made sense, and it was a compliment. But again, I guess it's not really something I would do. I wouldn't call a child out and have them really have to be defined by their skin tone or their bone structure. And it's just a way of, I guess, making you feel a little bit different than everyone else. I've always felt really at home with the Japanese Canadian community in Vancouver. So I just feel like kind of a member of the family, if it can be looked at as one big family. Being that a lot of people are beginning to get a little bit older and maybe they don't have as much time to dedicate to some of the organizations like the Powell Street Festival or the JCCA or Tonarigumi, I do feel a bit of a responsibility to step into those roles. I never felt like I was abnormal. I never felt that I was inferior in any way, but I just knew that I was definitely a little bit different. I think my family did a good job in spinning it in that I just have more perspectives than other people, and that maybe I'm more interesting than other people.
I actually didn't really connect with the Japanese Canadian sort of part of my background in a really purposeful, I want to learn about this way until probably university. And I had a sense of difference and knew that it mattered somehow. But then when I got to university, I was equipped with a language to talk about those feelings, which I didn't know existed until then. So that's kind of why I got connected with my Japanese Canadian roots. My family I think they're either everyone's a person, race, it doesn't matter, or move on and forget about it, it's in the past. My involvement with the Japanese Canadian Young Leaders, I can probably credit to a family member. Actually, my grandma called me and she had received the bulletin and saw that there was going to be a conference in 2014, the Japanese Canadian Young Leaders Conference, and so she thought I might like to go, and I did want to go because I had just got back from university. I had all these ideas and very few people to talk to them about. I volunteer with the Japanese Canadian Young Leaders now, which has become probably a lot more social than it originally was. But if we can still connect and support each other by hanging out and having a friendship, then that's going to stand the test of time more than any kind of position on a board or anything like that. So it's probably the most powerful thing we can do is to connect and be friends. Getting together to be friends and have noodles is actually, particularly for the Japanese Canadian community, a really politicized thing to do. It's remarkable that we get together when quite literally there was a state mandate to spread us apart. Having noodles together is important.
Deep and wide, a time to make things, a time to break things, a time is on our side.